Story time again on Kindling, bringing you the best African folk tales with moral lessons. I'm Awe, your storyteller, and today I'm whisking you away to Cameroon in Central Africa. Now, Cameroon has at times been called Africa in miniature or small Africa because it boasts examples of nearly all of the continent's different types of landscapes, from rainforests and mountains to savannas and coastline. It has over 250 different ethnic groups and languages. Pretty amazing, I think, but that's Africa for you. Today's story comes to us from the Fulani community and teaches us about the value of true wisdom. It's a story entitled The Tortoise and the Crown of Smoke. Let's hear it. Once upon a time, in the days when humans and animals lived as equals, there was a powerful king. He ruled wisely and was blessed with many sons, but his favorite child was his beautiful daughter. When she became of age, many men came to ask for her hand in marriage, but the king found them all unworthy. As the years passed, the king grew older and realized he could not keep her forever. He needed a son-in-law, but not just any man. "It is not wealth, strength, or beauty that I seek," he said to himself. "Only wisdom. With wisdom, a man can gain wealth, protect his kingdom, and keep my daughter happy." So, after much thought, the king devised a plan, a test to find a suitor who could possess true wisdom. The king declared that whoever could sow a crown of smoke would marry the princess and inherit half the kingdom. When the challenge was announced, the villagers murmured amongst themselves, The king does not truly want to give his daughter away, for who could possibly sow a crown of smoke?" Well, despite the impossibility of the task, many men gathered in the square to try their luck. A large fire was lit. The strongest hunters stepped forward first, believing that they could outsmart the king. They reached, swiped, and grabbed at the smoke, but it slipped through their fingers like mist. One by one, they left, defeated. When all of the men in the kingdom had tried and failed, it was now the turn of the animals. The lion was the first to try. "They do not call me the king of beasts for nothing," he roared. "Ah!" And then, with great ceremony and bravado, the lion sprang onto his hind legs, bared his teeth, wrinkled his nose, and prepared to pounce. Then, with much effort, he leapt into the smoke, clawing, biting, and swiping at the air. But no matter how hard he tried, the smoke would not stay. The lion continued this way for some time, until at last he was so exhausted that he collapsed, panting, and gave up. Now, after seeing all this, the hyena stepped up to take his turn. "Strength is not the answer," he laughed. "Speed is the key." And with that, he began to circle the fire, trying to trap the wisps of smoke in his jaws. But the more he turned round and round, faster and faster, the more the smoke drifted away. The hyena continued to turn himself round and round and round, faster and faster and faster, so that it almost seemed that he was chasing his own tail. At last, he became so frustrated and dizzy from all that circling around that he too gave up, defeated. Well, now it was the turn of the elephant, who had been quietly watching the other animals, sure of himself. "I am the most dexterous of all creatures," he trumpeted, and charged back and forth, sucking the smoke into his mighty trunk. With a great gust, he blew the smoke out into huge rings which floated across the air. But when he then tried to stitch the rings together, they vanished into the air before he could grasp them with his trunk. Try as he could to twist around the smoke with his trunk, the elephant too failed to sow the crown of smoke. and gave up. Well, at last, just as it seemed that no one else was willing to take up the challenge, the tortoise stepped forward and declared, "I will sew a crown of smoke for you, your majesty." The crowd erupted in laughter. How can this creature succeed where the strongest and swiftest have failed? He is so slow. But the tortoise was not bothered. He simply smiled. "Your Majesty, I know this is a difficult task, and because of that, I will need 7 market days to complete it." The king, bemused, agreed. "Oh, and one more thing, Your Majesty," said the tortoise. "I will need special materials. Do I have your word that you will provide whatever I ask?" "You have my word. So it shall be done," the king replied. And there you had it. Well, after 7 market days, the people gathered in the square again. Now, of course, everyone expected the tortoise to admit his defeat at this point, and they began to jeer at him as they saw him approaching the king with his hands empty. But the tortoise walked calmly up to the king and announced, "Your Majesty, I had almost completed the crown, but last night I sought wisdom from the spirits to complete it, and they told me something very important." The king leaned forward, intrigued. Really, what was it? "We have been using the wrong kind of smoke," said the tortoise. "To make the perfect crown of smoke, we need a special kind of smoke, the smoke of burning human hair." The crowd gasped. "If you wish to see your crown of smoke, Your Majesty, order your people to throw their hair into the fire, shave their heads, and give me all the hair to burn." Well, now the king, bound by his word, had no choice. He ordered his people to shave their heads and toss their hair into the flames. One by one, they did so, and as they tossed their hair into the fire, more and more smoke rose up. But of course, before the tortoise could gather it up to knit it into a crown, the smoke disappeared. "More hair," cried the tortoise. And so more and more people stepped forward in a line, tossing their hair into the fire. "More hair, Your Majesty, I need more hair." And still more people came forward until the entire kingdom had passed around the fire. Finally, the tortoise demanded, "Your Majesty, I need more hair." The king gave his command for more hair to be brought, but by now the people had no more hair to give. Not one single strand remained, not even on the heads of the king's own children. And so it was. Try as they may to obey the king's order, the king's subjects could not grow their hair back fast enough to keep up with the tortoise's demand. The villagers now stood bewildered as the king himself finally sighed, "It is no use." Then, realizing the tortoise's trick, he finally admitted, "What use is a crown of smoke when I already have one of gold? With this you have proven yourself to be the wisest of us suitors, and so I grant you my daughter's hand and half the kingdom." And with that, the tortoise became the king amongst the animals. Now they say to this day that though the lion may sometimes take the throne by force, the tortoise always reclaims his kingdom through wit. Strength may conquer for a time, but wisdom always prevails. And that is where the story ended. The tortoise is an endlessly resourceful character in African folklore, and this is an example of just that ingenuity. It's a reminder that you should think twice before setting someone an impossibly difficult test, lest you find yourself having to complete an equally impossible task because of it. True wisdom is knowing when to be cunning and when to be straightforward. Well, that's all for this episode. We'll be back again next week with a new story from the Central African Republic. Until next time, keep telling stories.